Resuming debate, the honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak again on C-8, an act to implement certain provisions of the economic and fiscal update, and particularly because since the last time I spoke on C-8, which was February 4th, the housing crisis, the inflation crisis, and the cost of living crisis have only gotten worse for Canadians. So, Madam Speaker, when I spoke in early February, the inflation rate was only the worst in 20 years. Now, it's the worst in 30 years and getting worse by the day. So, Madam Speaker, when I spoke in early February, the average home price in my home communities of Hamilton and Burlington area was around $1 million. Now it's up 10% further to $1.1 million and growing. This, I think, is a great failing, not only of the fiscal update and economic statement, but of this government overall when it comes to managing public finances and its impact on the economy and these issues. Madam Speaker, the cost of living crisis is spinning out of control. And what's driving it? What's driving it is more spending. And we know that the Parliamentary Budget Officer, as was previously alluded to by other speakers, including the one previous to me, asked the government about the proposed spending that was contained in C-8, and the response was that it appears to me that the rationale for additional spending initially set aside as stimulus no longer exists. And further, Madam Speaker, when asked at Finance Committee, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that at all of this deficit spending does contribute to inflation, which is why the $71.2 billion in additional spending proposed in the Economic and Fiscal Update 2021 is just adding more fuel to the fire of inflation. And it's going to make matters worse. We all know that gas and groceries, home heating are all up, and it's exactly the wrong direction for Canadians who are struggling to pay their bills each month, including those in my constituency. We know there was the report that the average family would pay an extra $1,000 in groceries for 2022, and I fear that realistically it may be more than that. Staple foods that we produce here right in Canada, like chicken, is up 6.2%. Beef is up almost 12%. Bacon over 19%. Bread over 5%. So what does C-8 do to remedy this situation rather than exacerbate it? And Mr. Speaker, as was alluded to by the previous speaker as well, we're just 4 days away from more tax increases. On April 1st, we'll all be paying more at the pumps, and other tax increases will take effect, such as the excise tax escalator that was referenced. And yet, the new NDP Liberal government voted down a sensible motion by the Conservatives last week to provide relief to Canadians by putting a pause on the GST at the pumps. Madam Speaker, what also worries me is the interest that's accumulating on all this massive debt hole that has been dug. You know, how many more billions in interest are going to be accrued, especially as interest rates increase? And wouldn't it be better to spend that on hospital beds or other investments in healthcare or infrastructure or properly equipping our armed forces at a time of heightened security concerns? Madam Speaker, as I alluded to earlier, the housing crisis has been engulfing Canadians for some time now, and there's no relief in sight, certainly no relief in C-8. Just down the road from where I'm sitting right now, down the road from my constituency office, there are hundreds of new families moving in every month, and they're leaving Toronto in search of more affordable life here in the western edge of the greater Hamilton, Toronto area, except that housing prices are skyrocketing here too. Like so many other Canadians, they're mortgaged while at the same time being squeezed by inflation. In fact, Madam Speaker, the average family in the greater Toronto or Vancouver area spends about 2/3 of their gross income to meet monthly payments for an average home. So how can families juggle this and the price of groceries? How can families juggle this and nearly $2 a liter at the pumps as they commute to work to pay that mortgage, while at the same time that gas is going to be taxed more this coming Friday? Madam Speaker, there is no real plan by the government to tackle housing inflation. Prices have doubled in Hamilton since this government came to office, and there's no plan to address the supply crunch. Here in the Hamilton area, we need 110,000 new homes built of all shapes, sizes, and affordability ranges just to keep pace. Housing inflation is also inflating rents in our region too. How can a young person save for a home when the cost of their rent is sky high and they're trying in fact, it's often more than they might pay in a mortgage payment down the road. So it's a vicious cycle, which has meant that 50% of Canadians under the age of 40 have given up on the dream of home ownership. And that's sad. You know, Canada has long been a land of opportunity for so many that around the world to look to, and people seeking to immigrate here for a better life and a better life for their family. Yet they arrive here and they find they can't afford to live. The housing is too expensive. Inflation is going up, and that's what we're experiencing right now. And so it's having a devastating impact on all Canadians, Madam Speaker. Take Lucia and her husband, for example. They are seniors living on a fixed income in my riding. And unfortunately, they must rely on the generosity of family and friends to help them with housing costs because they can't afford housing or rent. It's out of reach for them. And what is the government doing to help with this housing inflation so that seniors like Lucia and her husband can find houses they can actually afford? Similarly, Madam Speaker, Roseanne is a well-educated young woman in her 20s living in the Upper Stony Creek community within my constituency. Roseanne is saddened by what she sees among her peer group. She wrote to me recently, and here's what she said. For many years now, I've watched as my friends and colleagues have left Ontario for greener pastures in the West or chance to enter the housing market in the East. And over the last 2 years, however, I've now witnessed a mass exodus, not just from Ontario, my home province, but from Canada altogether. Madam Speaker, this is not right. Young people are tired of living in their parents' basement. Where is the plan to fix it? And there's also Heinz, who's a senior living on a fixed income in Flamborough, who has written to me a few times. And each time he showcases me his home heating bill. And the totals, they are astronomical. And it's going up a couple $100 month over month over the winter. And the taxes on that home heating are just adding insult to injury. So inflation is robbing Heinz of his gold, and seniors like him, of their golden years. Plus, rapidly rising prices of groceries are only making it worse. So, Madam Speaker, where does it end? When do we focus on the economy and growing it rather than growing the debt and deficit? Back in December, the OECD released a report that said that Canada would be among the worst performing economies in the industrialized world this decade. Worse than perennial underperformers like Italy and Greece. So perhaps it's even more concerning that this report also indicated that it foresaw a further 2 decades of weak growth. So I wonder why this is not raising more alarm bells. And how does the $71 billion in more spending, how does more taxes, and how does more debt turn this around? So, Madam Speaker, the economic and fiscal update and C-8 don't fix the housing crisis. They don't cool the inflation crisis, nor do they help people from my communities like Lucia and her husband, Roseanne, or Heinz with the cost of living on a daily basis. And that's why I stand with my Conservative colleagues and oppose this bill. Thank you.